be a real challenge in 2-3 years' time?
I think it's...
I mean, you're speaking as a professional politician about a colleague.
It is difficult for leaders to establish themselves. I think it's too early to tell. I can remember, quite frankly, when Mrs. Thatcher was first elected and everybody said, great, those on the left, she's not going to make it, we're going to win against this woman.
Can you remember when Michael Foot was elected?
Yes, and I mean, we've had all those things. I think it does take some time. But Mrs. Thatcher was really low at one stage. It was the Falklands War, and from then on, she came in the people's minds and eyes a leader. And I think her strength came from that. Hopefully, we don't have to go through such an experience again for Mr. Hague, but it's something we can watch. It's something we can watch and enjoy, quite frankly, while we get on with government. And after 18 years of it, I'm quite happy to do that.
And is Mr. Prescott right to take that line, Peter, in view of what the public are saying? Do they flesh out that image, or Norman Fowler's one?
Well, I think it's always rather a mixed picture we have, David, you see. I mean, first of all, may I say, to take up Norman Fowler's point, to be fair to him, it's not just William Hague's leadership that seems to be the problem with people, it's the Tory party itself. I mean, just have a look at this. Has your opinion of the Conservatives, not just William Hague, gone up, gone down, or stayed the same since that disastrous general election a year ago? Here's what they say. 6% say it's gone up since the worst defeat since the Duke of Wellington's time. Gone down 22%. 22% say it's gone down, and 70% said it stayed exactly the same as when they had that serious defeat. Let's just go back now to that roller coaster. I mentioned it earlier. William Hague took this wonderful roller coaster ride a year ago, just after he became leader of the Conservative Party. 31% was the share of the poll that his party won at the general election. The worst, as I've said, for 170 years or so. Down he went in the polls in the summer of last year, recovering now a little bit, coming up now, and our latest estimate of the share of the vote is that it's 32 and rising. We have a feeling it may be a little bit up on 32 now. We'll soon see when we get the latest figures in. But that is a little bit up on the general election, but it's still badly down on the kind of place the opposition should be at this time in a parliament. Where should he go from now? Well, the answer is he should be going up from now on. He's going to take some tumbles in the years ahead, but by the time of the European parliamentary elections in June 99, he should be up in the high 40s. And then by the time of the local elections in June 2000, May 2000, he should be certainly way up there in the mid to high 40s, because he's going to take a plunge at the end. Oppositions usually do, governments come back, and he'll need the momentum to steam through that magic figure of 43% that he'll need if he's going to have a hope of winning the election, which could be at the earliest, I should think, about May 2001. So there's the broad picture then. There's his target, 43%. That's where he began, down on 31%. He needs to be hitting those peaks in the mid-term of this Labour government that'll give him the momentum for success. He's down there, a long way down there. He's got a long way to climb up. David.
Let's have a look now at the Liberal Democrats. They're running 25% as against 26% in the local elections last year. The local elections, of course, were on the same day as the general election, when they got 17% in the country as a whole. Let's go down to Winchester and join Diana Medill. Diana.
Yes, good evening. This was a Liberal Democrat stronghold before tonight. Remember Mark Oaten's spectacular rematch against Jerry Malone, the former Tory health minister, in a rerun of the general election. Well, tonight it is still a Liberal Democrat stronghold. They have retained Winchester City Council. And Julian Lewis, your Conservative MP in nearby New Forest, there's still a long way to go before you come out with the political wilderness here.
Oh, I think we've made a very good start tonight, because if there was one city council in Hampshire where I would have predicted no Tory gains at all, if I'd been unwise enough to predict, it would have been Winchester, because even at the election wipeout on May the 1st, the Conservatives had a very close run with the Liberals, but then the by-election, as you said in your introduction, had been a massive disaster for the Conservatives, massive boost to the Liberals, and yet we've taken 2 seats off them tonight in Winchester, and in this area, in this Euro seat, the Liberal Democrats went in to the elections tonight in control of 4 out of the 5 councils, and they've lost overall control in 3, and Winchester is the only one they've hung on to, so it's a good result from the point of view of our recovery.
Tory spin or truth, do you think, Mark Oaten?
Well, it's hardly sort of Hague fight back. I mean, let's face it, there have been 19 seats tonight here in Winchester. We've won 16 and the Tories have won 2. That sounds to me, by any measure, it's a superb result for the Liberal Democrats, and no sense at all of a fight back for the Tories in this seat, and indeed in this region. Good news tonight for the Lib Dems, and a long way yet for the Tories if they're to recover.
Now, Alan Cleaver, you're from the Hampshire Chronicle. How come the Liberal Democrats have made themselves the natural party of government here?
I think a lot of hard work on the ground. They're certainly very good at putting out information and leaflets and newsletters. So I think they've won a lot of people in that way.
So local issues rather than national issues?
I think so, certainly. And I mean, housing, planning, environment, all of those issues very much of a concern.
So why can't the Tories get it together, do you think?
I mean, it would seem that they are. I mean, there seems to be that sort of blue horizon this morning.
It's very distant.
Well, it's you know, a couple of games for the Tories, and so there would seem to be that it's coming that way. But they've got a lot of work to do. I'm sure they would recognise that.
Or maybe the attention should be focused on the Labour Party because they have lost out to the Liberal Democrats in Winchester again.
Well, they're furious. There was a leaflet put round today which looked all for the world like a Labour leaflet. It was actually put out by the Liberal Democrats. They consider this underhand tactics, and they're blaming much of their defeat on you know, dirty tactics by the Liberal Democrats.
I really don't think one league will affect election results. Labour are actually failing to deliver on education and health. Those promises, and the electorate have turned against them.
Paul Latham, you're from the Countryside Alliance. How much do you think the rural issue has affected people's voting here?
I think it's starting to come through. I think what we've seen over quite a few years now is local politics being dictated by national events.
So which party is actually stepping in and capitalising on these concerns in the rural communities?
I think pleasingly we've seen progress from all of the parties. We saw all of the parties represented at the march, and we saw a lot of positive decisions.
So they've taken the issue
government
under their umbrella, but how much do you think they'll convert it into any sort of policy, and so that there will be changes along the lines of what you would like?
I think we've got to wait and see. We have to give this government a chance.
But how long can you wait and see?
Local politicians a chance as well.
You will give them a chance?
Yes,
Until?
I think we wait and see. If there needs to be another march at any stage in the political process, then it can come off, but we give them an opportunity.
Thank you all very much indeed. And so Winchester remains Liberal Democrat tonight.
And here is the result of council elections so far. At the moment we're running at Labour at 70, no overall change. Liberal Democrats on 12, they're down 5 in terms of control of councils. The Conservatives on 5, up 2, and 3 more to no overall control. And when it comes to councillors, Labour are down an overall 19 at the moment, 230. The Conservatives up 51. It's still early days. There are over 4,000 to come in, 101. The Liberal Democrats down 29 at 98. Independents 7 up 2. I'm not quite sure why no overall control is there as a councillor. I think that's a slight error. A councillor with no overall control is very, very unlikely in modern politics. Liberal Democrats have gained Liverpool, and Liberal Democrat losses: Isle of Wight, West Lindsey, Rochford, Woking, Colchester and Hastings. So they've lost 6 overall. So, I mean, Campbell, it's a bit disappointing in terms of councils, because you always like to have these councils. You use them as sort of flagships. Popular vote, not so bad.
Yes, and as I think as someone else said a moment or two ago, it just needs the change of 2 or 3 seats sometimes for these councils to change control. We gained 386 council seats 4 years ago, and if Norman Fowler's figures that we're only 86 down were to be correct at the end of the night, we'd be very satisfied with that. I'm disappointed about the Isle of Wight, obviously. We've held that since 1981. But the popular vote of 25% suggests that throughout the whole of the country, or those parts of the country that are voting, Liberal Democrats are consistently scoring ahead of their national opinion poll ratings.
And does this
that is going to be encouraging.
Does this mean that Charles Kennedy was wrong when he said the country wouldn't like the strategy that you and Paddy Ashton are pursuing of constructive opposition because it was a contradiction in terms, it had no long-term future, it meant you had to pull your punches all the time? It sounds from what's happened as though your supporters don't think that at all. Indeed, I think our poll supports this.
Well, you rather hinted at that, I think, earlier in the programme, but it's for Charles Kennedy to answer for himself. But I think the notion that we can find a form of politics which doesn't involve people opposing simply for the sake of opposition is a very popular one with the public.
Yeah, but I
suspect the poll that you're maybe about to show us may bear that out.
Well, we'll have a look. But is it a green light to you and Paddy Ashton to accept posts in a Labour government if they're now offered?
It's a green light to go on with the Joint Consultative Cabinet Committee that discusses constitutional affairs. It's a green light to go on agreeing with those parts of Labour's manifesto with which we agree and doing so publicly and saying so. But it's certainly a green light for going on saying to John Prescott and his colleagues, you're not doing enough in health and you're not doing enough in education. That's what constructive opposition means.
More than you promised, but
no, not in real terms.
Do you think you're going to be in government by the end of this Parliament?
Good. Well, do you think you're going to be the Director General of the BBC?
No, I don't actually, as it happens.
Well, you know, these are very interesting speculations, and they're always very flattering. But I regard them simply as speculations. Our job is to go on in the House of Commons with 46 members of Parliament putting the Liberal Democrat case, and we'll go on doing that.
Curiously, when I put the same question to Paddy Ashdown on Question Time, whether he'd be in the Cabinet and whether this was part of the strategy, he said not necessarily, which, as somebody pointed out, is as near a yes, I am going to be in government as you'll get from Mr. Ashdown.
Well, perhaps he is...
Sounds like no to me.
Yes. I think Mr. Ashdown must answer for himself. You asked me a direct question.
You're a great party. Everybody has to answer for themselves.
Well,
Kennedy must answer for himself. Ashdown must answer for himself. I mean, who are you speaking for? Bing Campbell,
that's one member, one vote, and that's why when we decide who our candidate is to be for the mayor's post in Labour, in London, we will do that on the basis of one member, one vote of the Liberal Democrats within London.
John Prescott, do you expect coalition government before the end of this Parliament, effectively with the Liberal Democrats in government?
No.
And are you sure it ain't going to happen?
I'm never sure about anything in politics, quite frankly, but you asked me a direct question. I think I gave you a direct answer.
Okay. Peter Snow, let's have a look at the Liberal Democrats and how things stand with them.
John Prescott may not like it, but the public certainly do like this working relationship closely with Labour. If you looked at what people said about Labour and the Liberal Democrats, when we asked them, is their close relationship, these two parties, good for the country as a whole, bad for the country as a whole, or making no difference, this is what people said. 59%, nearly two-thirds, said yes, we like this close relationship. 8%, only 8% said they didn't like it, and 33% said they didn't think it made any difference. But look at that. The majority of people we talk to saying we think that this close relationship is good for the country as a whole. Now, what about the Liberal Democrats and this maddening contrast for them between their local election and their general election and their national election performance? Here they are in local elections, starting with the locals in 92, 94, they climb up there to the high 20s, stay in the high 20s through 95, 96, 97 local elections, 26%, and here they are today on 25% in the local elections. Now just contrast that local elections record with what happens in national elections. 18% in the general election of 92, in the European elections of 94, 17%, 17% in the general election of 97, on exactly the same day that they were scoring 9% more than that in the local elections in the country. And then here we have them now on 25% in the local elections today. In ICM's latest question to people, how would you vote in a general election, maddeningly for the Liberal Democrats, they get 16%. Only fair to say, by the way, of course, that 17% at the last election won them more MPs than they had since 1929. But still they have this infuriating habit of doing rather poorly in terms of share of the vote in general elections, but doing rather well in local elections. David.
Thanks very much. John Prescott, there's one question I didn't ask you. I said, did you expect to see them in? Would you like to see them in government by the end of this Parliament, the Liberal Democrats?
No, we voted as a Labour Party. I mean, Tony made it clear, indeed we said in the manifesto that we would work very much with the Liberals on constitutional matters. We're doing that, and I think when Peter Snow was talking about his swingometer or what the people said, they like the working on controversial issues like this. They wasn't asked the question, do you want a coalition? You asked me about coalition. I think people do like us to find common agreement about constitutional change, and that's what we agreed to do, whether it was in Scotland, Wales, or indeed on the London issues.
So you don't want Paddy Ashdown as Foreign Secretary instead of Robin Cook?
No, definitely not.
Tony King.
I don't think Ming Campbell has picked up one of the curious paradoxes of tonight's results. Here we have at Westminster the Liberal Democrats in many ways cozying up to the government, at least on constitutional issues. The curious thing about the local election results on the ground is that the Liberal Democrats are doing best where they're head-to-head with the Labour Party. If you look at wards and towns where Labour and the Liberal Democrats were first and second way back in 1994, the areas, indeed practically the only areas in the country where the Liberal Democrats are actually making progress is where they're slugging it out with the Labour Party. It's a very odd mixture. National politics are being fought one way, local politics, at least in the north of England, especially in places like Liverpool and Sheffield, seem to be being fought in a completely different vein.
And if my private information is borne out, there's more of that to come, particularly here in London.
Brief comment, Robin?
Where this poll is interesting in showing the public support for the idea of the Liberal Democrats cozying up to Labour, I'd like to see a breakdown of what Tory supporters were saying, because the evidence of tonight is that it is hindering the Liberal Democrats' ability to pick up votes among disgruntled former Tories. It may be a popular idea among Labour and Liberal Democrat supporters, but it's hindering, I think, their chance of picking up those votes. And local government elections in recent years, Liberal Democrats were able to gain from Tory unpopularity as a national government and Labour unpopularity in areas where they'd been long established in local government. Now it's not so easy for them to pick up those softer Tory votes.
But wait a minute, a 60% or roughly 60% poll of all those who are asked the question is a pretty compelling endorsement of what we're doing.
Okay, let's leave that and just have a glancing look at London before we go. It's going to take a long time to get this referendum out in London because of the votes being separated. If you voted in London today, you had 2 ballot papers, one on the referendum and one on your borough council, and they have to check all those and count them all out. And we only have 2 results in from London, and it's running at 78 yes, 22% no for a mayor, and the Lewisham and the City of London are the only 2 we've had in, both saying yes. And Glenda Jackson, the Environment Minister, saying the low referendum turnout can be attributed not to apathy but to certainty. And Ken Livingstone, I think Tony Blair will shortly make it clear that London Party members will be allowed to decide who they want as mayor, referring, of course, to himself. Yes, John Prescott.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what the different turnouts were for the City of London, where there was no local elections and it was only on the referendum, and what the results were in areas where there were local elections.
Yes.
Because we don't know whether one's pulling the other one along. There's a lot of discussion about that, and I don't know whether we've any information about what the turnout was there and what it was.
Well, we've only got those 2.
We do, actually.
30% in the City of London, was it?
Well, we do have information in the sense that the turnout outside London is only at about 28%. The turnout in London is running at 36%. Now, that is lower than London has exhibited historically, yes. But I think the evidence does suggest that probably the referendum is causing some people to turn out.
No, but I mean the City of London, within the
City of
There's
London.
no local elections in the City of London. That was only a turnout for the referendum, and I wondered whether the turnout was any greater for the referendum than it was for local elections.
And, of course, we don't know whether everybody who voted for the referendum in councils where they had borough elections also voted in the borough elections.
Yes, that's
some people may just have voted on the referendum. We shall discover
and
all
if
that.
Apathy, maybe people may have voted
apathy,
in the local,
complacency.
in the local election, but not in the mayor.
There's a Euro election at the moment going on where people are voting at the same time in a Euro by-election in Yorkshire, and whether there'll be any differential there.
Yeah, well, we'll have a thrilling night. We can stay here till 4 in the morning. Let's go to Trafford in the northwest now and join Martha Carney. Martha.
Well, Trafford used to be a staunch Tory heartland, so for the Conservatives to make any kind of national recovery, they really ought to have done well in places like this. Well, tonight they haven't. Labour have held on to Trafford Council, even gaining a seat. With me now is David Sundberg, former Conservative MP for Bury South, Beverly Hughes, former leader of Trafford Council and a Labour MP elected last year, and Chris Lynch, who's a Conservative councillor in Trafford. David Sundberg, earlier on people were telling us that they thought the Conservatives could go to no overall control. It's a pretty disappointing result for you.
Oh, I don't think that was ever going to happen. We weren't going to get control.
Well, your campaigners told us
well, we always hope. We're always optimistic. But we've made a couple of gains, and if you look generally over the country, we're making modest gains. Tony Blair called for a ringing endorsement of a first year of Labour government. I don't call it that. Low turnout for Labour must be deeply worrying. They won't admit it, but it must be deeply worrying as they embark in their second year of government.
Beverly Hughes, low voter turnout, as we've seen elsewhere in the country. Does that show a lack of enthusiasm for New Labour?
What we found campaigning is that we expected a low turnout because people were generally very satisfied, very content with what's been going on.
Funny way of showing you're satisfied by not turning out to vote.
Well, no, it isn't actually really funny at all, because if people were motivated to change the situation in Trafford, they'd have come out in droves. They didn't come out because they're happy with the Labour Council and they're happy with the Labour government. And whilst the Tories are trying to put a brave face on what must be a bitter disappointment to them, they failed to make a dent in Labour's control of what was formerly a flagship Tory authority, the only Tory-controlled Met outside London.
So how are you going to get it back, Chris Lynch? And when talking to some of your canvassers, they said they're still shell-shocked after the general election, and do they go up the driveways of big houses with dirty great Jaguars in them, and people are saying we're still supporting Tony Blair.
Well, I think we're already beginning to make that fight back, and as David has said, there have been gains here tonight, and this is the first time for some years that we're actually moving away tonight with more councillors than we had when we arrived. But we have got lessons to learn, and we are listening to what people say, and we have got lessons to learn from the Labour Party and some of the things that they have done in the past, and we're picking up on that, and we're starting to talk to people, we're starting to use the same sorts of techniques, and it's beginning to show progress. What we've done tonight is really given ourselves a very firm base to retake Trafford over the next year or so.
Well, it's not much of a firm base, is it? The Labour's majority is now 8 seats. It's going to be much more difficult for you to fight back.
Yes, but in the years to come, we'll have better prospects and we'll do better. It's an extraordinary statement from Beverley to say that everybody's satisfied with the Labour government, so they stayed at home. That's not what Tony Blair urged them to do in the House of Commons a few days ago. So the answer is that people, Labour supporters particularly, are not happy people. This is not the government they voted for. They've got some tough decisions next year, and it's going to be very difficult to get those people out next year and in the European election.
But on the other hand, Beverley, they did seem to be voting on the national picture. I mean, Tony Blair came up here. Do you think that was an important visit?
Well, it was a tremendous boost both to party supporters and to the general public that met him, and he did get an absolutely, fantastic reception. But no, I think generally that people here are satisfied with the change that the Labour councillors made. They are satisfied, very satisfied with the first year of a Labour government. And really, quite frankly, if people had wanted change, if they'd wanted more Tories, they'd have voted for them. They didn't. They gave Labour a bigger majority.
If people here were voting on the national picture, doesn't that say something about the performance of your own shadow cabinet? That the Conservatives really haven't learnt to behave like an opposition yet?
It's a long road back. It's not easy. We had a shattering defeat a year ago, but we're building a new party, we're building a new constitution, we've got a new leader. It will take time, but that you have seen tonight in Trafford and in the region and in the country some modest Tory gains. Now that's a base on which to build, and the Labour Party have got to worry if their core support is not coming out. It augurs badly for them.
But Chris Lynch, not much of a base to build on, is it, for the future?
Well, I think you've got to look at the actual result. I mean, what Beverley says about the support for Labour.
Labour increased its lead.
But look at the majorities. A lot of the Labour people who won their seats again tonight have got greatly reduced majorities, and our majorities are very much up. In my own seat, our majority has gone up from 600 to 1,000.
Briefly, Beverley, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, because really what Chris isn't pointing out is that they haven't dented Labour's support. They made gains from a weak Liberal Democrat and from an independent in a seat that was formerly Tory. They've not dented at all Labour's hold on Trafford.
Beverley Hughes, David Sundberg, Chris Lynch, thank you.
Thanks, Martha. And on the back of that, let's go to Stroud in Gloucestershire, and where Labour were hoping to gain that council, and join John Pienaar. John.
Well, David, here in Stroud, Labour's held on fairly comfortably as the largest party. They've dropped a couple of seats, the Tories have picked up a couple, but no party in overall control. And really this election here in Stroud, one where the local election has been just that. There are now 4 Green councillors on the council, there are 6 independents. Pavement politics rules, or does it? Now, here to discuss that with me, John Marjoram, who's leader of the Greens in Stroud, David Drew, the Labour MP who took this previously staunchly Tory seat at the last election, and Janet Wood, one of those 6 independent councillors. But let me ask you first, John, your victory, so something of a victory for the small battalion.
Well, I'm delighted because I think we're developing to a one-party state in this country, and it's great. I'm very pleased that in actual fact the Independents and the Greens held their position, increased their position. I think on the doorstep people were talking about local issues rather than national issues. I think that basically, they recognise that Tony's in power, but let's see what we can do at a local level. Highly intelligent discussions I've had on the doorstep.
So to that extent, you think Labour's big victory last May helped you, rather?
Indeed. They thought that's done. They think they've done their piece, and so let's look at what, issues at the grassroots.
It must also be true, though, that many Labour voters must have stayed loyal to Labour but stayed at home.
I think this is right. I think that it was very low turnout here. I don't know if that's something like 33% overall, much lower than usual when, there was negative voting, when we sort of said, got to vote Labour to keep the Tories out. Now that no longer exists, you see. So I think there's a difference there.
Yes. Now, David Drew, you must be somewhat disappointed at the way things have gone here tonight.
Well, we could have done with hanging on to control overall, but we've lost a couple of seats, and clearly we need to look at the situation. But we are by far the biggest party. We've done well in the rural areas as well as the towns, and we like to think that our vote is held reasonably steady. It's always more difficult when you've got 5 groups compared to general election, where it seemed to be a straight fight between ourselves and the Tories, but we've held our heads up high.
So you say you've got to look at the situation. What do you make of the situation at this early stage? Has some of the gloss perhaps worn off New Labour? Was it a question of pavement politics asserting itself? What do you make of it?
No, I think that local issues and local personalities do make a difference, and we would like to pride ourselves that our councillors go out and they work for their constituents on the very basis of local democracy. But there is a problem with local government at the moment. People still see it as a test for national government, and I think that that's something that we've got to try and do something about. It is important that people separate what can happen at the local level from what is happening at the national level. Unfortunately, at the moment, that's not seemingly to be the case.
And at the end of the day, Stroud isn't the sort of place that we've come to think of as natural Labour territory, is it? It's very much rural Middle England.
I don't think that's true. There's always been a strong Labour vote in Stroud. The problem has been that the opposition vote to the Conservatives has tended to be split. Of course, last time the vote was quite clear that they wanted to elect Tony Blair and they wanted to put a Labour MP into Stroud. We think there's plenty of opportunities to build on what happened last May. We haven't gone backwards, in fact, this year, but of course we need to recognise that we've got to do a bit better to make sure that we can get good control of this council.
Well, Janet, what do you make of all this? You're one of those who take the view that the more councils in no overall control, the better.
That's right. There are 237 of them in the country, or there were until tonight, so I hope that we are one again. Yes, it means that we've knocked the spots off the rather tyrannical rule of the Labour Party in the last 2 years at Stroud. They will have to work with one group or other groups, and it will mean return of consensus politics, and that means dividing up the finite sum of money into by area, not behind closed doors, but an open committee. The Policy Committee was abolished 2 years ago. Policy Committee should now come back to a council, so we have an open debate again.
But they do say this council was very finely balanced for quite some time, and in that time it said that the council was pretty much paralysed. No one could decide anything.
No, I don't think that's true. I think we had a lot of consensus politics, which is important, I think, at this level. And I think that's what we're trying to say. Rather than we often win the arguments but lose the vote. Now, hopefully something will come out of this where you can share, and have everyone's mind into a problem. And I think that's important at this level.
Certainly it's all right talking about consensus, but people have got to take responsibility.
Oh, yes.
One of the problems with Stroud is people have actually wanted to take decisions and then walk away from the responsibility of the impact of those decisions. And I think there is a need for a greater maturity in local government. I'm all for the sort of reforms this government is intending to introduce, but people have got to recognise if they get increased powers, then they've got to use that power to good effect. And that's obviously one of the tests that a council like Stroud will have to look very carefully at how it's prepared to deliver.
And Labour's going to have to play it very, very briefly, very carefully here from now on, because you won't get it all your own way in the coming weeks and months.
No, but they never did. I mean, it's a myth to pretend that you can always get the votes through. Yes, it helps if you've got an overall majority, but this is a council that has traditionally always been close, and we'll have to see how that goes.
I have to stop you there. Thank you very much, all. David, back to you.
Thanks, John. John Prescott, looking at these results, they come in so far. Labour came in last year with terrific energy and pizzazz. Isn't it a disappointment to you? You said an hour and a half ago that it was complacency that had stopped people voting. Isn't it a disappointment that excitement that you engendered that managed to get you that huge majority in the House of Commons seems to have dissipated so quickly?
Well, as I said, and all through this election on the doorstep, she did find a complacency. We've told them for years, win this local election this year, it's another step towards a Labour government. Many of them feel, well, we've got the Labour government, we're quite satisfied with it, the polls show it to be that, why do I have to turn out? I think what is significant in these elections, Stroud, we held that one because we won a by-election with the Liberals, right? So it was always been a dicey balance there, and it's not gone strongly against us. Trafford's much more significant. If the Tories can't advance in that area like Trafford, and it really was when everybody put an awful lot of weight into it, given a low turnout, we're still able to hold and advance in Trafford. That's very, very significant indeed. It's a council that the Tories have got to hope to win. We've only had it for 2 years out of 100 years, I think it is. So that's significant.
But you say complacent. Aren't you worried, though, that the country appears just to have turned off politics?
No,
or is that something that rather consoles you, pleases you?
No, I think they tend to turn out when they're very dissatisfied, usually against the government. We've got a unique situation within the first 12 months. We've not followed the same characteristics which we've seen before in these cases where they tend to swing against government. But we are concerned about turnout. As you know, we've been looking at a number of different ways in council elections where we can probably get some greater turnouts. Indeed, some polling stations were put in one of the supermarkets this time to see if we could get a greater turnout. It'd be interesting to see if the turnout there was numbers higher than the traditional polling stations we have at the moment. And we've got quite a lot of ideas for local government reform to see how we can increase participation in that. The election of a mayor, a London Assembly, is a different, more exciting way of dealing with things. We're bringing out our local government proposals for change in a number of things in the next 12 months. So we do want to lift up participation in voting, but you've still got this split between 70% and 40%. It's been there through government after government after government. This is a new low, and I'm not very happy about that, of course, but I don't take that's not an endorsement of government. It's one where they feel they don't need to come out, and complacency has been a particular factor in this case.
And aren't you going to risk making politics, local politics as well as national, and the new assemblies in Scotland and Wales, less exciting because of your control over the candidates that are chosen for Labour? This Project 99, this vetting people so carefully, may produce a kind of sanitised Labour Party that's all in Mr Blair's image.
Well, I think people eventually have to make a judgment about that. Without that, we've got low results, so we're asking ourselves, are councillors up to what we think the standards should be? As we've advanced in the demand of standards, there are a lot of pressures have been put on councils. We want to get a proper balance between that. We want the best people to come in. We want to encourage more and more younger people to come in as well and play a part in it. Now, that's quite proper. That's Project 99. We want them to have the tools to be able to deal with their constituent cases. Now, I think that's quite a proper way of modernising our party, modernising local government, and as we've said, it's not just about modernisation of government, it's modernisation of local government, and we're just about to start on it.
I just wonder whether the John Prescott of December 1966, when he was leading the Seamen's strike and rubbishing Harold Wilson, the Labour Prime Minister,
fighting for change and never stopped,
would ever have been selected as a Labour candidate under these rules. I mean, people like yourself, would they get in now?
Yes, of course they would. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We can see the evidence of that at the moment. But we have a selection.
Where do we see the evidence of that?
Well, you can look round our candidates if you want to. We can talk about the individual candidates. But I think our move to one person, one vote to select the candidate was a proper and democratic move to achieve those ends. And we've produced various candidates of various qualities and various controversies. But nevertheless, I think we're still embarked upon to have good representative candidates. If a party doesn't do that, it won't get the support of the electorate.
Okay, Mr Prescott, thank you very much. Peter.
Steve, we're going to make an effort now to update our picture of the pattern of support all over the country as a result of these local elections. We can assess the vote. What we can now do is we've totted up the votes in a number of local wards that make up parliamentary constituencies. Of course, we're not voting for Parliament this time, but we can make up the votes in these parliamentary constituencies and compare them with how those constituencies voted in the general election. We've chosen 50 constituencies, 50 seats countrywide, won by Labour mostly in the general election. These represent the Labour majorities in the general election last year. One or two Liberal Democrat seats and a couple of Conservative ones as well. Big Labour majority Ipswich, small one in Wirral West, so you can see the size of the block there. This is a substantial Labour stronghold in this selection of seats. Here we have 40 Labour seats, starting those easy for the Tories to turn blue up here. That's Michael Portillo's seat in Enfield Southgate. He lost that in the election, 1,400 votes. And as you go down, they get more and more difficult for the Tories to turn blue. Now, the Tories would need to turn all these seats here blue in the general election if they were to stand any chance of winning it. 8 Liberal Democrat seats here taken for the Tories and a couple of Tory seats here. Now, what has happened when we tot up the local votes in these seats? Here we go. And look how the colour changes. We found the Tories effectively capturing a number of these Labour-held seats in the last general election, simply when you count up the local votes. It's not a general election, of course. And you have some of these rather safer Labour seats in terms of the vote of the last general election turning out to go Tory. Bear in mind, terribly low turnout, and of course, these are local votes in local elections. Nevertheless, it gives you a picture. Now, from this picture, when you compare the share of the vote in those seats with the share of the vote last time, you get a projected national share now that's looking a little bit different. Labour has come down a shade to 37%. The Tories are up there at 33%, a 4% gap only between the two main parties in our projected national share now as the night goes on. 25% of the Liberal Democrats, the same as they were, and 5% the others. Now, again, very low turnout, and one other important point. We haven't yet had any BBC 50, any real sign of what's happening with the votes in London. They're still counting the referendum votes in London, so London's still to come. But having made those two cautionary introductory remarks, let me just show you that if this were typical, what the change on the general election last year, which is the crucial measure really, would be. Labour down 7% on that terrific general election result they had, although in terms of share of the vote, it was about the same as the Tories won each time under Thatcher and Major. 7% down the Labour Party, up 2% the Conservatives, so effectively a 4.5% swing to the Tories from the last general election, with the Liberal Democrats, as I was saying a bit earlier, up in these local elections by 8%. But would they do that in the general election? Who knows? David.
Peter, thank you very much. Let's go to Labour Party headquarters in Millbank Tower. Hugh Edwards is there. You've been let in this time, Hugh.
Happily, David, yes.
A different atmosphere?
Well, they're certainly happier here than they were at Smith Square. That's not surprising. Labour are claiming that if at the end of tonight, Local Government Minister Hilary Armstrong with me here saying that if they end up with the same number of councillors more or less as when they started, they'd be pretty pleased. But Hilary Armstrong, on this key question of turnout, don't tell me you're not embarrassed by the low turnout.
Oh, I hate the low turnout. I've been arguing about the low turnout ever since I became minister, and today is a great disappointment. But that vindicates the determination of the government to modernise local government and make sure people are much more connected to their council, and therefore voting will matter to them.
Where has the argument broken down? You've spent the campaign, you've tried to encourage people to go out and vote, you're still a relatively new, fresh government, and yet you seem to be failing in enthusing people at least to go out and vote.
Well, I think part of the problem is that we got used to saying to people, you can use this as a protest vote, as a means of saying to the government that you don't like them. Well, clearly we weren't able to use that, and that isn't what people felt this time. But nonetheless, we're not going to be complacent, and we're going to do whatever we can to improve turnout in future elections.
Now, where are we going to be at the end of the evening? We'll be number crunching here very busily.
Right.
What do you suggest will be the outcome for you at the end of the evening in terms of net gains or losses?
Well, we do think that we are managing to hold on to some seats, some councils that actually we thought we had very little chance of holding on to, like Trafford, which we've just seen Labour hold. And so we are very encouraged by that. I never like making predictions, but I do think that we're going to end up about even over the night. And I think that will be a major achievement 1 year into a new government.
Hilary Armstrong, thank you very much indeed. David, it's back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Hugh. So let's catch up, Tony King, with your analysis of results in these elections so far.
One London point, one general point. In London, the indications we have so far is that the swing that we're seeing to the Conservatives, not an enormous one, but a measurable one in the rest of the country, is not being reproduced in London at all. The evidence suggests that the Conservatives are up very slightly, Labour is up very slightly, but there's absolutely nothing in it. So that our projections later on, when we begin to get results from London, may give a somewhat different picture from the one that Peter Snow has been giving. Can I just make a much more general point, though? People are talking about why turnout is down. The experience of every country suggests that broadly, the more elections you have, the more often you invite people to go to the polls, the less often they do so. And we are rapidly becoming an election-ridden country. We have referendums, we're going to have a Scottish Parliament, we're going to have a Welsh Parliament, we have Euro elections, we have general elections, we have local elections. Sure as I'm sitting here, the more often, to repeat, we ask people to turn out, the less often they will do so.
Labour wants local elections every year, don't they? Instead of these overall council elections.
Well, let me submit to you that one reason, only one reason, why the turnout has been so low today is that in so many places people know that what they're being asked to do is not going to make any difference at all. In council after council, the word was, this council cannot change hands. Well, why should somebody go and vote unless they're passionate about politics if it's not going to make any difference? I would have thought if you want high turnout, there's a lot to be said, not for having annual elections, but for having the whole council up every 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. We've been joined by some new guests here who I'll introduce in a moment. But first of all, we go to the regions to see your results in more detail. We have a problem in London and the South East, which is that we haven't got any of the London boroughs in yet. None of them have declared. They're still sorting out, no doubt, the referendum on the mayor from those votes for councillors. All the councillors in 32 boroughs in London are up. But we do have results from the South East as a whole, or what the BBC calls the South East. Liberal Democrat losses in Woking, in Rochford, in Hastings, and Liberal Democrats hold in Brentwood and St Albans, Conservative gains in Tunbridge Wells and Runnymede, and Labour gains in Hastings from the Liberal Democrats. And Labour holding on to Welwyn and Hatfield, Milton Keynes, Basildon, Watford, Oxford and Stevenage, and remaining in no overall control, South Bedfordshire, Bedford, West Oxfordshire, Cherwell, Epping Forest and Tandridge. And just these two results in, it's astonishing how slow this is tonight. Yes, 78%, no, 22%, exactly what it was a couple of hours ago. And Glenda Jackson saying of this, the low referendum turnout can be attributed not to apathy, but to certainty, i.e. everybody knew that everybody was in favour of a mayor, or so we were told. Ken Livingstone making his pitch to be allowed to stand in the Labour Party's vote on who should be their candidate for mayor. I think Tony Blair will shortly make it clear that London Party members will be allowed to decide who they want. So that's how things stand. I'm afraid there hasn't been very much change since last time round. Peter.
David, Londoners have had two votes today. Londoners have been voting for mayor and assembly, yes or no to that. They've also been voting, of course, for their new borough councils. 32 boroughs. This is what they look like until tonight. Labour with half of them. Labour on 16 of the boroughs there. You can see spread right the way across London. 4 Conservative ones, the worst Conservative figure ever. In 1994, the Tories only won 4 boroughs. You can see them there, including, of course, Wandsworth and Westminster. Liberal Democrats had 3 and no overall control. The sort of dark grey areas there, 9 altogether. So what to watch for? Well, of course, for Labour, if they could ever collect that showpiece, that Wandsworth showpiece the Tories have there with the lowest council tax in London, that'd be marvellous. But more realistically for Labour, probably Brent and Hackney. Hackney was a Labour council at the last election in 1994, last London election. It then collapsed in disarray and it's now no overall control. Brent, quite a realistic possibility for Labour. Also a possibility for the Tories. These are the 3 possible Tory targets here. Brent, Barnet. The Tories also just short of control of Barnet. And down here in Croydon, oddly enough, there are no Liberal Democrat councillors elected last time there, so the Tory and Labour votes are very close together. It is conceivably a Tory gain. As for the Liberal Democrats, well, if they are to have a setback tonight, it probably would be in Kingston. They only have a majority of just 1, overall majority of 1 in Kingston. So a lot to watch for in London, David.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Well, Wandsworth is the place that was one of the flagships of the Tories during the Thatcher years, Wandsworth and Westminster. And there were rumours that the Tories thought they might be in some difficulty in Wandsworth, but the council tax was cut by, what, 23%? It didn't look as though they were in that much difficulty. Lance Price is there. Does it look as though the Tories have held on, Lance?
Yes, the Tories have certainly held on. Indeed, they've been making gains here in Wandsworth. They've already taken 6 seats from Labour on the council here. We've got most of the wards in, still a couple of wards to go, but it's clear that once again Wandsworth has provided good news for the Conservatives on local election night with, as I say, 6 seats taken from the Labour Party. The leader of the Conservative group here was concerned about those rumours that you were talking about, the speculation that perhaps the Tories might be in trouble here. He saw that as a bit of rather unhelpful speculation coming out perhaps from Conservative Central Office, although everybody was denying it. But it seems that it hasn't done the Conservatives the damage that they feared it might. Wandsworth will stay Conservative.
No results here in Hackney yet. This borough, of course, has been no stranger to controversy. What happened here 2 years ago was the Labour group, which was ruling then, imploded, and that there were mass defections over a scandal involving a paedophile, and that 17 of those former Labour councillors, of those 13 are standing as either Tories or Liberal Democrats this time. That's likely to have a key impact. Neither Liberal Democrats and Labour are both saying this could be on a knife edge, too close to call. It's really being seen as a test of whether New Labour can put its bad reputation in Hackney behind him. That's the story in Hackney.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, here in Church House, the party's well underway. It's a shame the results haven't started flowing in a bit more readily. Let me just remind you of the Lewisham result. 78.4% voted yes, 21% no. That's 40,188 voting yes, 11,060 voting no. All sorts of gossip coming in, as you can imagine, on election nights like this. A lot of talk that Labour are doing pretty badly in Islington, Liberal Democrats making big gains in that particular council. Of course, Tony Blair used to live in Islington. Now, let's talk about the campaign itself for the London referendum. The No campaign, Simon Randall, ex-GLC councillor. You're not doing very well, are you?
No, we're in a sense disappointed but not surprised. But I think what is particularly worrying is that we're going to have a referendum turnout that is lower than any borough election ever in London. And I think that is worrying. And what that means is that about 25% of Londoners support the proposal and 75% just aren't interested. And I really wonder, is that what people think of Blair's vision for London?
But doesn't that put the onus on you that you should have run a rather better no campaign? It was a bit pitiful, wasn't it?
No, I think the onus is actually on the government and those in favour of it to put forward the reasons why a mayor and assembly is desirable. They haven't done so. Because frankly, I think if Londoners knew the full picture, and the white paper doesn't give the full picture, then I think Londoners might actually have taken a different view.
We heard Glenda Jackson being quoted there saying this isn't the result of apathy, it's the result of certainty. In other words, people knew in their hearts that they wanted this, and therefore they just didn't bother to vote because there was no real no campaign, and they might as well have just stayed at home.
But of course people are also voting for the borough elections, so they're two votes at the same time. So I don't think that argument holds water. If indeed people were not voting for the mayor and the assembly because of certain, why didn't they then come out in greater numbers to vote for borough councils?
Simon Randall, thank you very much indeed. 2 results are due in 15 minutes' time. We wait with bated breath. David.
Thanks so much. Robin Oakley, what do you think about what's going on in London?
Well, I think we've got to wait and see some real results, but obviously the first indications are that the Tories are holding on to what they've got and making a little bit of progress. That's a key indicator for them, because a lot of their worst losses at the general election were in London seats, so they will be very keen to see that they bottomed out in London and that they're making some progress there. I always recall that set of elections a few years ago when Ken Baker was the Tory party chairman, when he managed to get the entire focus on Wandsworth and Westminster, when the Tories were having an absolute disaster elsewhere in the country. And it was one of the most successful pieces of election spin doctoring that we ever saw, because the whole of the media did take up what happened in Wandsworth.
Is Norman Fowler spinning tonight?
I don't think the Tories have been able to pull quite the same trick this time around, but obviously it will be crucial that they hold on there.
Hold on, let Robin Oakley have his say. Go on, Robin.
Well, I was saying that it's going to be crucial that they manage to hold on there. Be interesting to see what happens in Islington. The Tories have been making a big focus of high council tax there, and the fact that Tony Blair pays less council tax in Downing Street.
Okay. We've had most of England's results in, but not any from London yet, and these are the results that we have got. Labour on 72, no overall change. These are mainly the big urban metropolitan councils we're talking about, of course, tonight. Liberal Democrats on 12, down 5. The Conservatives on 5, up 2. 3 more at no overall control. And in terms of the council seats, Labour down 100, the Conservatives up at 183 and rising, Liberal Democrats down 78, pretty much the kind of predictions we were talking about at the beginning of the evening, and the Independents up 1, others down 6. Liberal Democrat gains, they took control of Liverpool Council, and the losses, they'll be disappointed by the Isle of Wight, where they had a majority of 14 before. West Lindsey, Rochford, Woking, Colchester and Hastings they'll be sad about too, which has gone to Labour. Conservative gains, Tunbridge Wells and Runnymede. They were saying they'd hope to take Runnymede, and they've done that. And Labour losses, Cambridge, Labour holds, Trafford, Milton Keynes and Rochdale. And John Prescott, Deputy Prime Minister, speaking on this programme, said he was concerned about the turnout. We've got lots of ideas for local government reform to increase participation. It's the Labour line tonight is they're worried about the complacency of people not going to vote, but as Tony King was saying a moment ago, the more elections you have, the less likely people are to vote. And Sir Norman Fowler, on the Tories' position tonight, step by step we're recovering. The signs are of people coming back to the Conservatives. And that old referendum, it still stands at 78-22, with only 2 councils declared, so it's all speculation. Right, well now we've been joined by Nick Harvey for the Liberal Democrats, who's their campaign's director, and Nick Rainsford, who's Minister of London for Labour, and Sir Norman Fowler, I'm glad to say, is still here blowing his trumpet, or the Tories' trumpet. Nick Rainsford, have a look at, well, you can't say much about London because we haven't had anything in from London, have we? That's the trouble. What about the rest of the country?
Well, we've had 2 referendum results, and there's a
Pretty
4 to
tedious,
1 margin in favour, which I
Yes.
think is pretty good news, and
25%
I hope that will be repeated in the other ones that we'll be hearing shortly. But I think the significant thing about London is that the Tories did extraordinarily badly 4 years ago. As you rightly said, they were reduced to just 4 councils. And if they were to make a recovery, if they were to be really making a recovery, they would be making very substantial gains in London. All we're hearing...
Why are they making gains in Wandsworth? They seem to have gained, what was it we said, 6 seats in Wandsworth?
So it looks as though, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, it looks as though we may have taken 3, 4, 5 seats in Wandsworth. Now, the significance of Wandsworth is, and that's why I wanted to interrupt Robin Oakley, the significance of that was that if it had been simply a replay of the 1997 general election, which is actually what was being suggested earlier in this programme, we would have lost Wandsworth by a mile. We haven't lost Wandsworth, we've gained it.
The significance of Wandsworth is that a week and a fortnight ago, Conservative Central Office were letting out clues that they were likely to do badly in Wandsworth. That was the same old ploy that Ken Baker did
How does that affect the...
4 years ago, 8 years
vote?
ago, and the reality is that Wandsworth is absolutely rock-solid Tory. No one ever had any expectation of Wandsworth changing.
But you took all the seats at the general election.
And the truth of the matter is that the
That's the
Tories,
most amazing
the
statement
Tories
I've
are
heard tonight.
trying to divert attention away from Brent, from areas like that, where they ought to be making progress if they were going to win tonight, and in fact they're focusing attention on their own rock-solid seats because they are expecting to do very badly in general elsewhere.
Okay, Nick Harvey.
Well, the idea that the Tories were going to lose Wandsworth was an idea that the Tories themselves have been spinning for several days, precisely on the lines that Robin Oakley was describing, to try and repeat their 1990 coup in getting everybody to think that Wandsworth was where it all began and ended. I think the London results will be interesting. I think that looking at the tables that you've put up of the number of seats the parties have been gaining and losing, Liberal Democrats will be hoping to do well in London. We can already see that we're getting encouraging news back from Islington and Camden, for example, which are 2 Labour-held councils, and I think that the picture will be quite encouraging for us in seats where we're fighting with Labour in London. And I think that's borne out really from the same picture in Liverpool, where we have given Labour quite a clouting, and in Sheffield we've made some advances as well. So for all that you were having my colleague Ming Campbell believe it was too cosy a relationship between Liberal Democrats and Labour, I don't think the Labour candidates on the receiving end of that this evening will have found it at all cosy.
Okay. Tony King, very briefly, you've got some hard news from London?
Yes, we've been looking at key wards in London. We've looked at 67 so far, comparing them with the result in 1994, which was very good for Labour. The Conservatives are indeed up 1 percentage point, but so is the Labour Party. There's been no swing to the Conservatives at all in London compared with 94. Lib Dems down a bit.
The count is on this referendum for the mayor is taking place at Church House, just near here, and Jon Sopel is there. Let's go over there and see whether we might be in line for any more figures. John.
David, we're waiting and waiting anxiously. There are 2 results that we're hoping to get. And music starts up, wells up behind me. So that means the result's going to be coming in about 30 seconds. We're expecting the results from Camden and Wandsworth, and they're going through this little rigmarole beforehand. I'll try and talk over the noise if I can. The results are becoming very slowly, and there are some that are going to come very, very late indeed. But the returning officer, Rob Hughes, who is the guy who's going to come out, will hopefully declare spot on 1:15. They're planning to do these results at 1:15. Here we are.
I'm now going to declare the results for Camden and Wandsworth. The first result is for Camden. The total number of votes cast was 45,057, representing 33.3% of those eligible to vote. In answer to the question, are you in favour of the government's proposals for a Greater London Authority made up of an elected mayor and a separately elected assembly, the votes cast for yes were 36,007, representing 81.2% of the valid votes cast. The votes cast for no were 8,348, representing 18.8% of the valid votes cast. Rejected ballot papers were 702. That completes the declaration for Camden. I will now declare the result for Wandsworth. The total number of votes cast was 77,915, representing 39.3% of those eligible to vote. The votes cast for yes were 57,010, representing 74.3% of the valid votes cast. The votes cast for no were 19,695, representing 25.7% of the valid votes cast. Rejected ballot papers were 1,151. That completes the declaration for Wandsworth. The cumulative total after four results are yes, 134,182, representing 77.2% of the valid votes cast. No, 39,677, representing 22.8% of the valid votes cast. Total votes cast, 176,380. And the turnout so far is 34.5%.
There we are, Rob Hughes leaving the stage after declaring those latest two results. I think perhaps more significant than the numbers voting in favour of the referendum is the low level of the turnout, way down on previous elections. And this is a big disappointment for the parties who all campaigned on the yes platform. More results are due, and the turnouts again are similarly disappointing for those who were hoping that this would be an emphatic endorsement of the mayor. David.
John, thank you very much. The sweet music brought you in, and sweet music takes you out again. This is
it was all planned like that.
Looks as though more money was spent on announcing the results than anyone bothered to spend on the campaign, either for yes or no.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is that there has been a high-profile yes campaign, but I guess they have been victims of the fact that there hasn't been a big dispute over it or a big row. I mean, I suppose one of the interesting questions for Labour politicians is that if it turns out that you're only getting 34% of people turning out, you know, there's this big debate going on in the Labour Party over when workers should be able to join a union, and there's some talk that it would be 40% would have to vote in favour of that. Well, on these terms, they would be well below the threshold necessary to elect themselves a mayor and assembly, but perhaps that's a slightly different point.
So no positive vote for a mayor is what you're saying?
Well, it's not the emphatic result that people had hoped for.
Why do you say it was a high-profile campaign? I didn't notice anything going on.
Yes, and also
Why do you call it high-profile, the campaign? There didn't seem to be anything happening.
Well, there are all sorts of politicians. There's been a lot of glamour and glitz attached to the sort of names that are going to be throwing their hats into the ring. And there have been various, you know, sort of barges with adverts going up and down the Thames sort of telling people that they should vote yes. And all the politicians have been imploring people, all three parties have been lined up behind the yes campaign. But it just may be that the British people, a year after the last general election, aren't engaged yet. The people in London aren't engaged in the idea of a mayor. Maybe they think it's a certainty and that there's no point going out to vote for it.
OK, well, let's talk in a moment about the powers of this mayor, because we know that Labour wants cities all over Britain to opt for mayors. They think it's a good way of taking local government forward, and the interesting thing is whether those powers amount to enough or whether they'll turn out to be something that just creates bad blood between the mayors and central government. I mean, whoever does become London's first directly elected mayor will have powers which current local council officials can only dream of, but when you compare them with the powers of mayors abroad, they're not quite so impressive. Set beside continental mayors like city bosses in Barcelona or in the United States in New York. Janet Street Porter went out to find just how powerful a new London mayor would be compared with them.
Dick Whittington and his cat came to London to seek his fame and fortune. He ended up Lord Mayor 3 times. Now, if he'd made that journey today, just how much power would he have had? I'm off to find out. The Lord Mayor that we have at the moment sometimes seems more like part of our tourist heritage than a major political player, although he maintains he serves a useful function. Well, he would, wouldn't he?
I have a role in leading the International Financial Centre, and I think it's important that we should have somebody in charge in the city, pulling all those strands together.
In the States, they know how to do mayors. The mayor of Kansas City was here recently, and although he doesn't have a gold chain like his counterpart in Tower Hamlets, he wasn't too impressed with the powers that we're promising to give the new mayor of London. Just as Mayor Cleaver towered over his British host, American mayors dominate their cities in a way that will be hard for the London mayor to match.
The powers based on what the plan is today will not be sufficient. Right now, there is no fiscal note included. The mayor will not have the ability to raise taxes. The mayor will depend primarily on Parliament, on the largesse of Parliament, and that's not going to do it.
The new London mayor won't have the capacity to vary taxes, but will have powers which most members of Tony Blair's cabinet might envy. He or she will run London's transport system. Just think of all those complaints. Oversee London's police, working with a new Metropolitan Police Authority. Run the capital's fire service, overseeing a new London Fire and Emergency Planning Authority. And act as a central player in London's cultural and sporting life. Winning an internationally important sporting event like the Olympics for your city is one thing a mayor can certainly help with, as Barcelona found out in 1992.
As you are the recipient of the will of the people of Barcelona, you can demand the other administrations action, political action, and you can demand the business community to participate in political process.
Other European cities echo this call for a mayor with a strong central role.
You have to give him all the means, the instruments, and the powers to allow him to really be the mayor, not only elected, but in charge.
But all these calls for power worry some people. Is there a danger that a new London mayor would be too powerful?
I think there's a huge danger that the elected mayor could be an all-powerful figure, and that the role and responsibilities of the elected assembly, which I personally think is more important than mayor, may just end up being sidelined. I think it's crucial that the assembly has the power to hold in check the mayor and has the power to actually call into question what the mayor is doing. If that doesn't happen, there's a danger of this whole system collapsing into a shambles.
It's funny, isn't it, how those concerned about a powerful London mayor often mention Jeffrey Archer in the very next breath. Well, if the London Evening Standard has anything to do with it, Lord Archer won't be getting anywhere near the job. Perhaps it's the Standard's editor, Max Hastings, who's wielding the real power in London at the moment.
Readers and voters do not vote the way that newspapers tell them to. So, in that sense, I hope that we have some influence in setting the agenda. And we should certainly be falling down on our job if we didn't tell readers everything we can find out about the race and the candidates. But although, of course, we shall certainly endorse somebody when the moment comes, I would expect Londoners quite independent-minded enough to make up their own minds. So I don't think one should overstate the power of ours or any other newspaper to influence the outcome.
Well, that was Janet Street Porter reporting on the powers of the mayor. Now, all three of you, all your parties were in favour of this idea of a mayor, so let's just talk about what it really amounts to. From the Labour Party's point of view, you've got endless problems with corruption at local government level. You're perfectly open about it. You've got 10, 12 councils where there are allegations of corruption of one sort or another. You're going to choose a mayor and let him appoint everybody underneath him, like a kind of constant quango. He's going to be able to make his budget. The Assembly has to have a 2/3 vote to overturn it. Why are you setting up this figure who will be, I mean, if you're unfortunate, will be a kind of disaster area?
There are two issues here. One is that it is our proposal. The other parties have been, I have to say, lukewarm in their support for it and have found all sorts of reasons to cavil about individual parts of the proposal. So it's a Labour Party proposal, and we certainly take credit for it. We believe it's right to increase accountability. It will ensure that the individual is directly accountable to all 5 million voters in London, and will be able also to account for his or her performance to the Assembly.
But he can appoint his own cronies to every job on the quangos and all the rest of it.
No, he can't. We have set in place very clear structures to ensure that all appointments are made on merit according to the principles established by Nolan. And that is absolutely clear. We don't envisage any form of cronyism whatsoever. What we want is a framework where someone can be effective but also can be accountability. And it is precisely that accountability that is the best safeguard against corruption.
Well, we'll go to Janet Street Porter in just a moment. I said I'd bring the two of you in. Are you satisfied with that answer, or are you worried about the powers? What do you think, Nick?
Well, we're worried about it. The Conservatives and ourselves both wanted to see the two issues separated, the Mayor and the Assembly, because we are not happy about the Mayor, and the Conservatives, as I understand it, are not happy about the Assembly. But the idea of enshrining all this power in one person, who may not even command the support of the Assembly, is actually very worrying, and it would be far better that the Mayor be a figure who had the support of and was elected by the Assembly.
What we would have preferred is there to have been two questions in the referendum. We were in favour of a mayor, as Nick rightly says, and what we would have preferred is not a directly elected assembly. And I think that there were two sensible questions that could have been put.
But I mean, you've exhausted everybody with a single question.
Well, with great respect, I think that's wrong.
You asked more questions.
I think that's exactly the wrong point. If we'd had two questions, we could have had a debate. And there were two questions we had. The Liberal Democrats supported us on this, the House of Lords supported us on this, but Nick, and with his majority of 180, lost the argument but won the vote, as he tends to do in the House of Commons.
Well, listening to this down at Church House is Janet Street Porter, with one or two people who are quite interested in the way this may go. Janet?
Thank you. I'm with Trevor Phillips and Bob Scott. Trevor, all the candidates who've declared their hands so far have moaned on about the fact that London seems to subsidise the rest of the country, and the Lord Mayor's first concern should be organising getting back some of this cash. Is that what you